Evidentialists. Those would be
Right,
evidentialists.
evidentialist, right? There's some that base their belief on on cosmological design arguments. Design is tricky. Ontological, cosmological. I'm missing on a big one. Like you know, certain teleology or those kinds of
You mean transcendental?
argumentation. Yes, transcendental. So those are all non-empirically based, non-evidence based arguments.
I agree.
That's conflicting with what you just said. That theists base their belief on evidence.
I would like you to show me an argument where theists base their belief on evidence.
Sorry, not evidence. You said inductive reasoning. That's what you said, right? The Kalam cosmological argument is not inductive. It's deductive.
Okay, let's skip all this inductive, deductive stuff. Let's just show me an argument where theists base their belief on evidence.
Well, yeah, it would be a cumulative case from the cosmological argument. Craig does this all the time. Up into the resurrection, the historical argument for the resurrection. A lot of your evidentialists are going to be doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, so, I mean, are you familiar with something like the Kalam?
Somewhat, not really.
Or cosmological arguments?
I think you're going to have to hash out evidence first, because I don't think he's using the same definition.
Okay, so do you take evidence to be any kind of argument or any kind of empirical verification? Or do you take evidence to be empirical verification that's based just on inductive reasoning and observation, and distinguish argumentation from that?
I don't care anything about argumentation. All I care about is, can it be weighed, measured, and quantified?
Wait, but you see, there...
Can you hand him a cup of perception, Danny?
Yeah, so the idea is that most theists, right, especially Christian philosophers, are going to agree with you that God is not a thing that you can weigh, measure, and calculate the density of, right?
And there we are. Then why do we have a reason to believe in it?
No, look, let me try and give him an example, maybe. So the way we typically use evidence is that it just raises the probability of like the proposition being true, right? So if we're talking about, hey, was Jesus real? Did God really exist, like as in the Bible, right? It's generally the consensus amongst historians that a dude named Jesus did exist, right? So I might say that is evidence for the Christian God, because look, there was a dude named Jesus, right? That is in line with this Christian God notion, right? Now, it might not be compelling. It might not convince you. It might be just small evidence, but it is evidence, right?
So I would say that's evidence that Jesus existed.
Well, you can't. Well, go ahead,
Tom.
No, go ahead.
Well, I mean, there's a little I would add to that. So, evidence is what you would expect if something were true in the like an empirical world or whatever, right? So, if Jesus was God, we would expect to see Jesus to exist. We'd expect some people to give an account of his life, such that he might have thought that he was God. There's all these things, but there also, if we were to, what can we expect if Jesus was a fraud? Well, also that he would exist, right? And also, maybe some claims about him being God, right? The point is that it's what's expected on either hypothesis. And what we're doing when we're doing science or history, empirical stuff, we're seeing what kinds of things can we expect from this given hypothesis that we wouldn't expect from a different hypothesis to rule that one out, right? What kinds of things are we looking in the world to rule out the fact that Jesus was just a fraud or Jesus never existed or whatever, right? But I'm just saying that when it comes to a generic God, right? So let's just say we're not necessarily talking about the Christian God, kind of a philosophical notion of God. A lot of Christian philosophers accept non-empirical or verifiable arguments for God, right? So, like for instance, something like the ontological argument would be an example of one, right? The ontological argument is one that doesn't require any kinds of observations or scientific or historical hypotheses. Doesn't rely on any of that.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't know how you get from A to B when you don't actually present empirical evidence.
Well, look, there are things that you know or that you accept that don't rely on empirical evidence, that rely on reasoning or a conceptual analysis of a thing. I gave you I gave you plenty of examples, right? You have attitudes about concepts which are non-verifiable. You have attitudes about moral propositions, like you don't think that that we shouldn't abuse children, right? That's not verifiable. What's the evidence for that? That's a nonsense question with respect to that kind of proposition.
Well, there is evidence for that. It is detrimental to the well-being of the child. I mean, that's demonstrable.
That just begs the question.
It really doesn't.
Do you want me to explain why
really
it begs the question?
I really
Go ahead,
don't. I
Dean.
don't think you can.
Okay, well, the idea is that if I said that you should take care of a child rather than abuse them, okay, that just means that abusing children is bad, and taking care of children is good, right? You accept that much, right? Now,
Sure.
continuing, if you say that that what justifies that proposition is that it is conducive to the well-being of the child, I'm just going to ask you what well-being means, and I'll tell you, right? I'll just skip to it. Well-being is the good being, right? It's a particular state of being in which is good. Okay, so there you have you offered an argument, okay, or at least some kind of conditional, and it has the conclusion has a notion in the primacy, right? The guy's just going to ask you, well, what do you mean by
So you're trying to get way too philosophical about this. We have evidence at this point because there have been children previously who have been abused, and there have been children previously who have not been abused, and the outcomes seem to be better for the children who have not been abused.
You need
That
to
has
listen to
nothing
what
to do
he's
with
saying.
the philosophical argument.
I'm not even trying to dispute the claim so much as your reasoning. Your reasoning is no good here. To say that taking care of children is good because it's good for the child does nothing to inform the person as to why that's justified. Nothing, right? It begs the question.
Regardless of whether it begs the question, it's proper.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that you don't have an argument or evidence for it. Not the way
I just gave you the evidence.
Wait, no, but your evidence is circular, right? It's begs the question. Look, it's good because it's good. Look, if I said God exists because God exists, you would have not accepted that, right? In the same way that it's good for the
So
child.
you're simplifying it way too much just by saying it's good because it's good. It's good because we can demonstrate that it has previously. It's basically an experiment has already been ran to show that it's
what the good is.
Let him finish. I want to hear what he's saying.
Defining what the good is a different argument. The point is we have had a running experiment for probably since the dawn of people that treating children properly was better than not treating children properly.
Look, better is a notion that involves good. It's just a synonym. More good and better are synonymous. So you're
trying to make this into effectively a philosophical equation, which I'm sorry, I just don't accept.
Wait, do you think you're not begging the question?
It's irrelevant whether I'm begging the question because the concept has been demonstrated to be factual.
Wait, no. If I said that God exists because God has presence in reality, right? That begs the question, right? Because
that would be fine if you could demonstrate that presence in reality, though. It doesn't matter if it begs the question. If you could demonstrate that presence.
I'm going to do what you're doing, right? Oh, okay. Well, the reason why he has presence in reality is because he is somewhere in the world.
And you need to demonstrate that.
Right. Okay. Well, he's somewhere in the world. That means he has some kind of status of being in the universe, right? You see, what I'm doing here is rephrasing one notion over and over again, but it all means the same thing. In the same way that if I said that what justifies why caring for children is good is because it's better for them, well, that just means that it's good. Okay, that begs the question. It's just rephrasing the same concept in different words.
I think you're just using the word good and better and all that just to muddy the waters on the whole argument about abusing children.
I teach students, right? Sometimes I ask them just to troll them, right? What good means. And they say it's beneficial. It's what's beneficial. Do you think that is informative? Or what if they said, oh, it means that things are good or things are better when they're good, right?
Obviously, it's subjective.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that. That has nothing, you're changing the subject, right? I'm just saying that you claim that there's demonstrable or demonstrative evidence or evidence for the proposition that it's better to take care of a child or it's good to take care of a child than not, okay? And you provided a fallacious kind of reasoning.
This is just a semantic argument.
If it's semantic, what word are we disagreeing over?
We're disagreeing over the definitions of good and better and the way that they're being used, or maybe not the definitions, but just the fact that those are the particular words we're using. And it might just be because I don't know what the proper terms to use would be.
That's not my problem, number one. If you want to learn from me, that's one thing,
If
right?
you're a philosophy student and teacher, then it is kind of your problem, because if you're a teacher, your whole point is to get your points across to other people.
I've gotten my point across. I'm saying that...
You really haven't.
Look, I'm saying, do you agree that better and more good are synonymous?
Well, what I'm saying is we're using the wrong terminology if that's what we're hung up on.
You have the problem here, right?
I really don't have the problem here.
Wait,
you have the problem here.
Listen up. You said yourself that you may not know the right terms, right? I can help you, right? But you're being difficult.
You're being difficult. It doesn't seem like you know. If you know the right terms, just spit them out.
No, you are, Danny.
So the point is this.
But what am I?
I think what justifies... Well, first of all, there's a difference between what the good is and what might explain why you think something good is, right? I don't think that the good is reducible or definable in any kind of way, right? So, and I also don't think it can be justified, right? But things can be still true, because what good means, right? If I think that X is good, the implication is that it's desirable or I have most reason to actualize it, right? And that's understood in terms of your desires, right? The concept of normativity is not reducible to other kinds of parts, which means that it's a non-empirical, non-evidential, non-scientific notion. Because all science deals with, in terms of what things are, is what they're reducible to.
I mean, that's fine if you want to look at it from a clinical perspective like that, but that's not how reality works.
Look, you're being difficult.
That's
clinical
not
perspective.
How reality.
Look, I'm just saying that when we say that it's good to not abuse children, okay, then I'm just saying that that's something that we accept or something we believe, despite whatever evidence, right? Despite our observations. Okay.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Some people believe spanking is good. Other people don't. Some people accept it. Some people don't.
You're not understanding. I'm saying that if someone believes
I'm sure I'm understanding. You're not understanding. I am sorry, but you're just not getting this.
Can you stop fucking saying
that's demonstrable?
You fucking retard.
Listen. Wait, it's okay.
Let Danny have him. Let Danny have him.
Look, I'll chill out with my condescending tone, okay? So, listen to me, okay? When I say X is good, you're right. Other people can believe that not X is good, right? That's tangential and material to my point, right? The point is that we have beliefs about what is good. What establishes that is not something that's reducible to atoms, quarks, subatomic particles, anything empirical. It's not reducible to those kinds of things. Okay?
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, which means that it's non-scientific. It's non-empirical. There's no evidence. There's nothing that we could expect.
There is absolutely evidence.
Look, remember what evidence is. Okay.
Okay,
evidence,
like I said, I'm not going to do this clinical psychology so I'm getting my tongue tied here.
If you don't want to learn, then get out of the conversation.
Well, I came in to talk about what the understanding that everyone has about atheism as far as Gnostic, agnostic, and theists, And that's what I wanted to talk about. I have no idea how we got off into these weeds. This is boring, and I don't care about it at all.
Okay, well, the
Of course
problem.
you don't.
Let me explain why we're here right now.
Yes, that's correct. I don't.
Okay, let me explain why we're talking about evidence and morality and all this stuff and the good. It's because the notions that you're employing to distinguish atheism, agnosticism, belief, justification, good reasons, all those things you have, I think, defective concepts of.
Okay,
right?
can I make it? Can I try to simplify it and just ask if this makes sense? All right, so let's say that there is a dichotomy, A or B. Either A is true or B is true.
That's not a true dichotomy, but okay.
Okay, let's just say A or not A. If you really want to be like that about it, fine.
I didn't know
whatever.
if it mattered. Look, I didn't know if it mattered. I was catching it just.
It really doesn't. But okay, let's just go with A or not A. Okay.
Okay.
If I don't believe A, does that mean I believe not A?
No.
And if I believe not A, does that mean I don't believe A?
Wait, if you believe not A, it implies that you don't believe A.
I'm sorry. If I don't believe not A, does that mean I believe A?
No.
Okay, so there is an in between where I don't believe either one necessarily.
Yes.
Okay, so you have Gnostic for either one or the other, or agnostic, which is in between. All right, so if I want it, let's see. If you have anything to say about that, go ahead while I think about this.
I'll say what from our previous conversation, you wanted to affirm a default position. There's something about, and I did. That's what I was contending.
Okay, can I ask this then? If it's A or not A, do I have to believe one or the other, or can I not believe either one until I have evidence for one or the other? Which one of those positions?
I accept that. I accept everything that you just said. I accept evidence or argumentation is what I would say. Except, I would add because I distinguish the two. Maybe you don't. Maybe you take deductive reasoning as to be part of evidence. In which case, yeah, I'm on board with what you're saying. So,
all I'm asking is, if
I'll add one more thing. That's if you want to be rational. Sometimes people will believe things even though they recognize that it's not an inference or there's no evidence, and I don't think that's particularly a problem necessarily either.
Okay, well, so I do endeavor to be rational here. All right, so
okay.
If I come into or if I hear somebody's proposition, A or not A, one person's A, one person's not A, what am I supposed to do if I don't have any evidence pointing to one or the other? Am I supposed to just pick one, or do I just say I don't necessarily believe either one until one of them is demonstrated to be true?
Yeah, I think that's the epistemically responsible thing to do that you just said.
Okay, so when I say the default position, that's what I mean. Maybe it's a terminology issue.
Yeah, I have no problem. But I thought, maybe I misunderstood you, but I thought you said the default position was a kind of atheism.
Look, I only have a high school diploma from Louisiana, so I'm sorry I'm not that technical when it comes to terminology. Maybe that's been the whole misunderstanding.
Well,
this
that's
is
fine.
Meta. Let's stay on track.
But personally,
the guy you're talking to isn't geographically distinct, right? So, it doesn't matter. I don't know why you're punting to that.
It's okay. No, I know what he's saying. I know what he's saying.
The meta.
He just conceded. He just conceded the whole topic, Michael. It's over.
Who did?
You did. You just said the whole argument is about whether the default position is atheism.
Look, just
it's okay. Look, he was fine. It's okay. He just came.
I have not conceded the argument. You're just incorrect.
Okay. Well, look now what you've done. Look, we were fine, and then I whatever. Look,
we're still fine. Okay, we're still
okay.
I'm
fine with the progress, right? I agree with everything that you've said. Earlier, I didn't, so that's progress one way or another. Whether you've conceded or whether I've conceded, it doesn't really matter. Okay.
I think we just had a misunderstanding.
Well, I may not see it that way, but I don't think it matters. I'm glad that you accept. We agree on that at least.
Okay, so
charitable.
So let's go. Let's go back into the A or not A, and the fact that I should or should not believe one or the other or none based on evidence. So if A is a belief that there is a God or gods, and not A is obviously the lack of, or the assertion that there are no gods.
Right.
So if I come into those claims, which one should I go with? And I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I'm at work.
Well, that's fine. If you can you hear me though? If you're still at work, I don't want to speak.
Let me. I'll let you know when I get back.
Okay.
Guys, can you just like chill? I mean, like, do you really want to sabotage like hours of work Danny's putting in here just because you want to call this guy a retard or something? Seriously?
Yeah, that'd be way too easy.
The problem that I have is when he implies that Danny is, after all the work he's done.
But he just doesn't understand. He's just obviously a white belt, so.
Okay, I am back.
Okay. So you're saying I think your question was if you're presented with the proposition that there is a God or there is no God. I think you asked me which one what is the epistemic responsible. Well, what's the responsible thing to do, right?
Correct.
So if there's certain constraints of rationality, let's say, right, then I think the one that you should pick is the one that has the most evidence, right? Which I don't think they're empirical hypotheses, though. So that's the first problem. Or what has an argument. Look at the arguments for both sides, right? So on the theistic perspective, you have stuff like the cosmological argument, the ontological argument, and others. And then on the atheism, you have like the problem of evil. You have problems with the contradictions.
So I just reject the arguments entirely. I'm looking for empirical evidence.
Okay, so let me. Okay, I think I can knock this one out. I've explained it twice, but I think I have a different way of explaining it the third time. Okay, so here's the way. Remember, evidence is what you would expect if a hypothesis is true. So let me give you an example. If gravity were true in normal conditions, I'm holding some soap right now. Okay, if gravity were true, what could I expect if I let go? That would fall, right? So the falling, right, is in a sense evidence for the hypothesis that there is gravity. Okay, gravity explains, right? That's basically how evidence is, what explanation is in science. Okay, so now watch this. Okay, what could I expect in the world? What can I expect to see? Okay, if there's an imaginary friend of mine, right? From your perspective, what can we expect to see? Or a ghost? Okay.
Well, so the answer to that is I don't know. I mean it's a tangent.
Most scientists don't know either. It's not a scientific question because there's no predictions, no set of observations that we can make that would fulfill what we would expect to see if ghosts exist. That's why science tosses it out, right?
So that applies to anything that doesn't exist, though. Anything, literally anything.
That's true. But there are things I think that exist that don't generate any predictions. For instance, right? The concept of Harry Potter. Okay? Suppose that now this is controversial, so maybe it's not a very good example. Let me give you another one. What can we expect, okay, if someone had the intention of drinking water in the world? Okay, if people have the intention of drinking water, this is a tricky one, right? Because when we want things, when we try to do things, we could have either possibility, right? Either we would, be successful in drinking water, or we might be in some desert or in some kind of conditions where there's no water, and I'll fail, right? So here's a really interesting thing. The intention of drinking water generates no predictions in the world by itself. Right. So we're not, again, that's not really a good scientific question, right? Because there is nothing that we would expect. There's nothing that we could show or see to guarantee that that the fact that I have that intention to drink water. Even if I were to grab a cup of water and drink it, right? It could be that I meant to drink coffee, right? And I'm actually failing with respect to that other desire. Okay. So even when you point to cases where people are drinking coffee or drinking water, it could be that they don't even have that intention, right? They might be all blundering up, drinking the wrong stuff that they drinking the wrong beverage, right?
I don't see how this has anything to do with demonstrating a thing exists in reality.
Okay, so the point is that how we know we can have evidence for something, okay, is knowing whether my dog came in. Okay, is knowing whether it generates predictions, okay, or it generates expectations, you might say. Okay, now now watch this. Let's take the God hypothesis, cut it to the chase. If God exists, what can we expect to see in the world? And in the same way, if God does not exist, what can we expect to see in the world? Right? Now, the thing is that either proposition generates no predictions. There's nothing that we can expect from the fact that some kind of powerful being, immaterial mind out there exists, in the same way that there's nothing that's predicted from the non-existence of the thing. So there can't be evidence with respect to that question. There cannot.
Well, it depends. I mean, if it's a deistic God that doesn't interact, yes, that's fine. But if it's the God of the Bible, then there is an expectation based on his followers and the teachings of the Bible, etc., that there are things that you could detect.
I thought we were talking about atheism and theism, right?
Well,
right.
yeah, I mean, right. And I'm sorry if I got off on a tangent, okay? But in general, most religions do have specific predictions.
Right. So
not all, but most.
Right. So there are certain hypotheses. For instance, a condition perhaps in Christianity is that, or at least in Orthodox Judaism, is that there were Jews or Israelites at around these time periods in ancient history. Okay. And then that might generate predictions. What could we see in that area today? Oh, look, there's some artifacts, blah, blah, blah. We just continue, right? But that's not what I'm discussing. From the notion alone, right, whether you be deistic, panentheistic, or whatever, theistic, there's nothing that you would expect to see if there's a mind, a powerful mind, that knows everything, right? There's nothing that we can expect to see. In the same way, there's nothing that we could expect to see if that thing did not exist. So the thing is that another way of saying is that all of our observations are consistent with either hypotheses. So it's not a scientific question, right? That, at least the philosophical notion of God, right? Now, so then we take it to the next step. Okay, it's not an evidentiary or scientific.
Well, see, no, that's the thing. This is where I stop, because if we don't have evidence either way, and we necessarily can't have evidence either way, that's the end of it.
No,
it's non-falsifiable. It's over.
You're right, but falsifiability only applies to science. Would you agree?
What other way do we have of exploring the universe?
Math, logic, morality, metaphysics. These are all aesthetics, beauty. These are all things that are non-science. Right.
A lot of that stuff can be demonstrated, and a lot of it is also subjective, but other of it can be demonstrated. So
you said a lot of that stuff, right? But he's like admittedly, you're saying that there's some way to navigate the external world that can't just be reduced to the kind of evidentialism you're proposing.
Well, then it would be subjective, in which case it wouldn't matter for anyone else.
Do you think it's subjective that 2 + 2 = 4?
So that is a mathematical concept, is abstract, yes, but it's also demonstrable.
Show me. Oh, really? Okay. So if I were to say to me, prove that infinity minus infinity is
obviously infinity is not something that we can really work with.
Really? So you want to tell that to all the
I realize that it is used, but it is not something that we can work with.
It
maybe
doesn't
later
even matter, right? Look, if I
it does matter, because your example was 2 + 2 = 4.
Interrupting.
Add 2 apples and 2 apples, and they will be 4. I will interrupt when I need to interrupt.
Look, when we look at 2 apples, we're attributing the concept of 2 to that entity, right? But that's a different. I'm fine with. We can use a better example, right? If I told prove to me that 3,000 to the 3,000th power is whatever you put in the calculator. I don't have let's just call it X, okay? Show me the evidence for that it equals that. What are you going to point to?
While it would be difficult, it could physically be done.
Okay, physically. Wait, so do you think that if we were to calculate that in our heads, suppose it's capable? Okay.
No, I think if you actually had, 3,000 marbles and you worked it out to the 3,000th power, it could physically be demonstrated.
I don't think we even have that many atoms on the Earth.
That's fine, but the point is, barring the physical limitations of the universe, it is something that could physically happen.
Okay, wait. That's just uninformative. But you're agreeing that they're physical or scientific limitations.
Well, I mean, there's obviously a limit to the number of atoms we have in the universe, assuming the universe
this is
fine.
what I'm saying. We can know what 3,000 to the 3,000 power is without using the scientific method or evidence or hypotheses, right?
Math doesn't work that way.
Wait, right? That's my point. There are many things that we claim to know that are independent from the way the scientific method is. That's my point. You agree?
Yes, but they're also demonstrable.
Well, not by the scientific method or an evidentiary way, right? There's nothing that we would expect to see.
Technically, yes, because we have no other way of demonstrating anything.
And I gave you another example. Show me the evidence, right? Or show me what can I expect to see, right? If X is bad, right? Or if, let's say, stealing is bad.
Again, things that are subjective are very difficult to demonstrate in the way that you're asking. But we're asking for a proposition of whether a thing exists.
Whether it's okay, you're talking about ontology. So look, I don't understand. Most people accept that math, that logic, that there are truths, there's knowledge that we can come by that's independent from science. Most people accept that. Is that?
I have a question.
Wait one second. I want to. Do you think that we can come to know things apart from observational science?
I'm sure we can, but can we demonstrate those things to anyone else?
What do you mean? Do you mean show the evidence?
Yes.
By demonstrate? What? Okay, but that doesn't really even matter if you've affirmed that you can know things outside.
It really kind of does matter, because the whole idea is you're trying to demonstrate a proposition to other people. If you can't do that, then the other people have no reason to believe your proposition.
Do you know what modus ponens is?
That I do not.
It is okay. So here's an example. If a plane exists, it has wings. Okay, a plane exists. What can you conclude from that?
That it has weight.
That it has. I meant to say wings. I don't know if I came out.
It cut out a little bit. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So if a plane exists, it has wings. A plane exists. Therefore, what's the conclusion? It has wings. A plane has wings. The plane has wings. So that's a deductive argument. Now, the thing is that what establishes that to be true, the way we can know that from those two premises, is very different than the way we come to know whether gravity is the case or whether certain constants are what they are in science, or where we do physics or biology, right? That's logic, right? All I'm trying to explain, maybe I'm not doing a good job, is that you can come to know things apart from the scientific method, which is to say, apart from verifying what we expect to be true on a given hypothesis, evidence, right? It's independent.
So I'm still not getting how we can know anything without measuring it in some way.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Can I ask my question now?
Please, again, just one more time.
Yeah, so, like I said, did you measure anything when you concluded that that plane has wings? Did you measure anything?
We have examples of planes that have wings.
No,
yes.
no. That's not what I'm asking. I gave you a syllogism, right? If a plane exists, it has wings. A certain plane exists. What did you conclude from that? That particular plane that exists has wings.
So first of all, in order to make that conclusion, I need to accept the premises of your syllogism, and I don't necessarily do that unless you can demonstrate those.
We're not talking about soundness. Do you know that we're talking about validity?
I'm
Okay,
talking about
so-
both because that's the only way I operate is with both.
Wait, but how do you know it's valid? Did you measure?
Can I ask
Again,
a
you're
question?
also asserting that it's valid.
Wait, do you think it's not valid? You think that was an invalid argument that if the premises were true, that the conclusion wouldn't follow?
Is the
No,
purpose of this conversation to argue against or cast doubt on the scientific method?
Yeah. Just try to keep up. I've been talking to this guy for a while.
Okay,
So,
why?
well, look, I'm not talking to you right now. I can only handle one person at a time. The point. Okay. I don't know what your name is. I'm on my phone. So, here's what I'm asking. When you concluded that if a plane exists, that if a plane were to exist, it must have wings. From those two premises, did you measure something?
Well, your assertion that if a plane must exist, it does have wings, that's an assertion.
Wait, we're not talking about the truth of the premises. We're asking if the conclusion follows from the premises. You're changing the subject.
I'm really not. You could change this to any other thing.
Okay, fine. Look, I'm gonna. It's like pulling teeth. Let me change it for you because look, if A, then B, A as a second premise, what can you conclude from that?
So I don't even understand what you just asked.
Okay, look, it's like algebra, or I'm using variables. Okay, if A, given A, if A then B, then that's the first premise. You got that? If A then B, the second premise is A. What can we conclude from that?
Okay, if you're going that way, then yes, you obviously would have to conclude B.
Okay. Did you measure something?
I guess not physically.
Why does that matter? Initial observations.
Someone mute this person
You
before
can
I
either.
do.
Don't let Danny go. Let Danny go.
Okay, so there's a case.
Let me ask a question real quick. If we replace that A and B with things, then we can measure those things.
Look, that's why I'm telling you you're changing the subject. I'm not
changing the subject. I used exactly what you just said. If A then B, then A then B.
I understand that you don't think you're changing the subject. Let me explain why. I'm not asking whether the premises are true. The conditional is that if they were true, what would follow? What's the conclusion, right? You want to say, well, I want to talk about what happens if we substitute A for this or blah, blah, blah. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a different conversation. You just pretend that if A then B is a kind of premises that you would accept. Imagine anything that you would accept in those cases. It doesn't really matter, okay? The point is that you deduce B from the set of premises without measuring something, without seeing something, without hearing, smelling, or tasting something, right? You came to that conclusion wholly apart from evidence.
How do we know that if A then B?
Oh my god.
Okay, well, that's a good question. Modus ponens is kind of mysterious, right, as to how that is to be true, right? And I'm not qualified to answer that question. I'm not. I haven't read the literature, but on why that's particularly true. But most every human being accepts modus ponens. If you did not, you'd be in the 0.000 infinity 1 percentage of logicians, or I should say people, average people, not logicians. Logicians can be
I
weird.
would say that there are going to be plenty of times when people just use it incorrectly, and I think that this is one of those times pertaining to the argument about the proposition of a God existing or not.
Okay, but as long as, look, let's go one step at a time. You do agree that we can know things apart from measuring, testing, and evidence, right there. I gave you an example.
No, I do not.
Okay, wow. So when you concluded B from that...
Look, I'm not going to hash this out again. I do not believe that we can absolutely know things without being able to measure them in some quantifiable way. That's just it. That's the end of the argument as far as I'm concerned.
Well, then you're shutting down and you've conceded to having a contradictory belief, set of belief. If you want to leave the conversation with that, so be it.
Danny, can I try this, Danny?
Yeah, you can talk now.
Yeah,
now
so
let me tell you,
I think I understand the problem.
Wait, before 1 second, Yuri. I'm leaving the conversation. If you ever want to talk later, I'm on this voice channel all the time. Just letting you know that some other people may not treat. If you think I've treated you bad, good luck. Okay.
No, I'm not going to treat
a
him
lot
bad.
better.
I don't think
I'm
you've
not gonna
treated
treat
me
him
bad. I've not even noticed any
That's
condescension
not
in
the
your tone,
point.
so I appreciate
That's
that.
not the point. The point is that they're gonna. Good luck talking to other people about this.
You just threw you to the lions, bro.
I'll be very calm in how I do this because I think I understand what you're talking about because I used to hold your position, so I understand exactly where you're coming from. Do you know the difference between? I don't know if Danny went over this, or do you know what Danny means when he talks about a sound or a valid syllogism? Do you know what he means?
Yes.
Okay, so typically, right, what Danny's point is when in reference to deduction, right, is that when we talk about a valid syllogism, we're just saying that all the premises logically follow, right? And we're not saying that there's any truth value to any of those premises. So when we say, right, and modus ponens, by the way, that Danny mentioned is an inference rule, right? And so what he's saying is that if we want to determine whether or not something logically follows or deduce something, right, we don't do so through measurement, right? So the point he gave with variables, right, like if he says that A, therefore B, then A, then if A, then B, right? And when he brings up A, right, it would logically follow from that it's therefore B, right? But we didn't use any. The point is what Danny's trying to make, right? That we didn't use any measurement, right, to come to that conclusion because we're not talking about whether or not the premises are true or anything like that, right? Our goal when we're using those variables is just to determine whether or not those things logically follow. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
I
if
understand the structure's valid, but
Right.
so the issue that I would have there would only be with the premises.
Right, exactly. But we're not discussing whether or not they're sound or whether or not they're true. We're just we're creating a structure to see whether or not that inference rule is logically valid. Right.
I agree that it is, and so my question would be then pertaining to the conversation that we were previously having. What does this have to do with?
Right. So the point is, right, is that all the point we were the only point Danny was trying to make with you, right, is that he wants you to concede that there's certain things, especially when we're talking about the validity of something, right? All he wants you to concede is that there's certain things that we do, but we don't have to measure or we don't have to quantify or do anything like that. But we simply can logically deduce conceptually, right? Would you agree with that? Since we just demonstrated, excluding all truth, right, from the premises I just stated, that we can logically deduce if A then B, A therefore B.
Sure, I mean, like as a syllogism, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, exactly. That's the only point Danny was trying to make. Now, I don't know if Danny wants to hop back in, right? Or if someone else wants to take over and show how we can kind of use deduction, right, in the real world, because I don't want to hog the mic or anything, right? Then by all means, someone can step up and do that. But the only point I wanted to get with you, right, is just that when we're talking about the validity or talking about anything, right, and the purpose of what Danny was talking about was validity, that there's not going to be things, not everything in the world that exists can be measured, quantified, or anything. Some things are due to like conceptual analysis, right?
Okay, so anyway, the point of the conversation was I just wanted to kind of get a definition of terms. I've not really participated in this before of what everybody's belief was on atheism versus theism versus agnostic, etc. And it devolved into all of this philosophical and stuff that I really didn't want to get into, and I don't really have time for, to be honest.
The definitions are inherently philosophical.
I mean, and that's fine. I understand.
I'm terribly sorry to disappoint you.
No, I don't have an issue with what the definitions are, but we don't need to get into the weeds on just because I wanted to define some terms so that when I'm listening to this conversation, I have an understanding of what everybody believes the terms mean, because it's obviously subjective.
But clarity, you kind of invoke the philosophical when you start talking about definitions and logic and stuff like that, and then go on a an hour tirade against deductive reasoning.
I really didn't want to get into that.
Right, but now we've got him to concede, guys, that deductive reasoning, right? We do use deductive reasoning, and that when we use it, we're not measuring or quantifying anything, right?
Well, the reasoning, correct. I agree with you on the reasoning part, but when it comes to the premises, we actually do have to measure or quantify that before we can get to a valid conclusion.
Right.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. Can you demonstrate a married bachelor?
I can probably show you one.
Fuck's sake.
That's not what was
When you
asked.
demonstrate,
Well, the reason I say here's why I say that marriage is a legal construct. There may be somewhere that's a possibility. I don't.
fuck's sake.
Dude, all he's asking.
Turn in. Okay.
When he brings up a married.
Logically speaking, hold on. Logically speaking, does that make sense? Does a married bachelor make sense? Logically speaking.
I mean, obviously, okay. Going back to reality here, no. I mean, it obviously is a contradiction.
Okay, exactly.
Back to reality.
Exactly. It's a contradiction in logic.
Well, again, that's only true by convention.
And that's what I previously said.
I just don't put ideas in this.
It's a matter of.
I have plenty of my own.
But just to be blunt, you don't think that logically contradictory things exist, right?
No, I don't. A equals not A is not a thing that I feel.
Right, and the point, like a lot of people miss the whole point of why people even have these ideas like square circles, married bachelors, things like that. All we're asking, right, is we're giving like some sort of conceptual basis, right, to try to show a contradiction, right? That's the whole point. So to say anything about that or anything otherwise, right, it's just missing the. And it's just really not.
But again, the square circle one's only true in such a limited sense.
Our perceptions are relative, making them therefore.
Oh my God, Jesus Christ!
Because again, you can have square circles in mathematics here.
Right.
There's nothing stopping you from having.
Oh my God.
Actually, under a rectilinear metric, squares and circles are identical.
So can we just go back to what the original question was? Because the only question I had was what everyone's agreed, or could we agree upon a definition of agnosticism versus theism versus atheism?
No, clearly not. Clearly, through the conversation, we've answered the question. No, people have different understandings, and that's been demonstrated in virtue of your hanging on for God knows how long.
Well, so if we can't agree on definitions, how can we actually discuss it?
Well, we can
talk about what you mean. We can talk about what you mean and what your claims are. And Danny tried to do that, and he was like super fucking patient with you, and all you did was just hand wave him.
Well, he went off to something else that I don't care about. I mean, this was just literally dictionary definitions.
We don't care
if
you care about it.
And I don't care if you guys care about it.
The thing is, it's highly connected to what you want to talk about, though. I mean, if you say you want to talk about X, but you don't want to deal with Y, I mean, then what's the point?
Well, the point was I was listening to a conversation previously, and everybody seemed to have a different definition of these same things. And so I just wanted to clarify.
Why is that interesting? Wait, why is that interesting? Look, we can debate about whether Emily is a boy name or a girl name, right? But in the end, there's not a fact of the matter. We can debate about what the utterance agnostic or atheism or theism means, but in the end, there's not a fact of the matter. Now, it's true that we want to communicate. It's true that we want to communicate. So sometimes we're willing to adopt words that we don't typically use in certain ways, or we just dismiss them and we talk about the meanings of the words, the other side of the equation, so to speak, and then we move on with our lives. The most boring thing is a debate about how we use a sound. Right.
Well, so do
we whistle when we want to get someone's attention? Do we snap? Do we wave? It doesn't matter, right? Look, there's not a fact of the matter as to what a particular utterance or gesture means. It's so freaking boring.
But do we not need to define our terms before we ever enter into the discussion?
That's like if we do that, should take like 20 seconds. Or some kind of clarification, but there should not be if there's a discussion around that, that is so boring. Like I would rather watch soccer.
I don't disagree.
You turned it into that, buddy. You would think it would take 20 seconds, but you were the one that was fucking fighting against definitions, as though there was a fact of the matter. This was Danny's point the whole time, and he was charitable to you. What the fuck are you doing, dude? You're wasting
just trying to get some definitions, and we still haven't gotten any.
No, you're not getting clarity on anything. Clarity.
Wait, so clarity. If I told you, right, if we have an apple tree, right, and I told you, and in order to make things simple, okay, so let's say if I'm a mathematician, right, and the way I speak to a layman, right, would be different than I speak with like fellow mathematicians. And when we're looking at an apple tree, right, and I'm a mathematician, and I come to you, that the amount of apples on that tree is the square root of 64, right? And let's say you didn't know what the square root of 64 is, right? And you told me that you didn't know what the square root of 64 is. How would I go about explaining to you what I mean, or the quantity of apples on that particular tree? How would I go about doing that?
I mean, I don't know how you would go about doing it. The easiest way would just to say the actual number of apples on the tree in layman's terms.
Right. So the way I would go about doing that is I would flesh out what I mean, right? So if I don't know what square roots are, right, then I would flesh out what I'm trying to describe or what I'm trying to indicate. So instead of saying the square root of 64, I might just tell you that there's 8 apples on the tree. Right? That's
so what I'm getting here. What I'm getting here is that nobody wants to just use relatively simple definitions for the sake of the discussion. Everybody wants to make it.
This is hilarious. Like
I agree. I think it's funny that you think it's funny.
You just had a whole conversation where somebody tried to understand the way in which you were using these terms.
I was literally asking how people use the terms,
and you didn't fucking settle on anything.
Because we never got to it. I was literally asking how do you use the terms. That's
relatively simple, which should also take 20 seconds, right, dumbass?
I agree, idiot.
Yeah, then define it and then move the fuck on.
And no one ever did.
Look, we don't want to define these positions that we don't hold, all right? Just look, when you're talking to someone, ask what they fucking believe, what they're trying to say.
That's literally the first thing I did.
No, you said
what you did when Danny was talking to you. Danny was trying to understand you, right? Danny warned you about this too. He said, "Look, I'm being charitable, but just fucking wait," right? Danny tried to fucking tease out a definition of you, and you couldn't, by your own admission, just 5 seconds ago, land on one because you're being evasive. You're being dishonest.
Give you the definitions right now. Okay.
Yeah, and it doesn't. Your definitions don't work in the way that they're using the words that you're using.
So you're telling me that my definitions of theism, agnosticism, and atheism are incorrect?
Here you go with the fact of the matter. We're just asking you if it's coherent.
That is literally what we're talking about.
No, son. I just literally I'm going to say it.
I'm not your son.
Conversation about. I'm going to tell you a third time. The definitions
I'm not going to listen a third time.
Interesting. We're asking.
The definitions matter when we want to have a discussion that other people can understand.
The words don't match with how you're using them in the context of the conversation.
They literally match perfectly. They're the literal dictionary definitions. I don't seem to understand how this is so hard for anyone.
There is a claim.
Look, you weren't talking to Danny, right? You didn't say to Danny, "Look, what do you believe, Danny?" This is what you said to Danny.
I literally said that to the room right off the bat. It was the first thing I said. Can we talk about what everybody means by theism, atheism, and agnosticism?
Yeah. So you said here's 3 categories. What are these categories? Like, what it should be when you're speaking to a person, you find out what they specifically mean.
That's what I did. I never said the word categories. I don't believe this in this entire conversation.
You didn't say the word categories, but you did bring up 3. You said agnostic, atheist, and agnostic atheist, right?
It seemed like prior to my conversation, that's what everyone was talking about, and it seemed to me that people had different ideas of what the words meant. So that's why I wanted to clarify. That's all.
Look, you were wrong, all right? So what you would have heard is Danny saying that it's not informative to stick to those categories. That was the only thing that was mentioned about it, and then you came in and brought it up again. I have no idea how Danny managed to just talk to you so calmly for so long. The stamina is amazing.
Yeah, man, the only point, look, we're not trying to debate, right, what the definition of atheism is, right? We're trying to have a conversation in the sense of what you believe on the proposition. I think if I remember all the way back on the proposition, does God exist or does God not exist?
I didn't say I held a belief on that. I said I was going to take the atheist stance for a minute, and I was going to say, okay, what do these things mean? I've never said what my belief is.
The atheist stance. This is hilarious.
Yeah, there's no
But
the.
there's no fact of the matter.
An atheist stance. Then, if you want to be that way about.
There you go. Slow clapping for you, bud.
So I would just ask you, right? If you're taking, if I'm just going to be charitable and interpret what you're saying, right? I would just ask, right? Are you saying that you like lack a belief in God? Do you reject the proposition, or do you say that you know for a fact that God doesn't exist?
I'm refusing to say what my stance is on a belief in God or not because it's irrelevant to the conversation. I don't. That's not what I wanted to have a conversation about.
You're the one who mic'd up. I remember in the beginning, you're the one who mic'd up and said you wanted to take the atheist stance. If you don't want to define what you mean by atheism, right? I don't understand what conversation you're looking to have.
Look, again, I literally was asking the room what people's definition of atheism, theism, and agnosticism are. That's what I did. I literally
No, that's not what you did. I got bad news for you, bud. This whole thing was recorded, so we can just rewind and prove you wrong.
I mean, I don't care if it was recorded or not. That's what I wanted to know. That's how I started out. I can't help if the conversation devolved into whatever
you were
it
making
was.
But
then it's like it's like in a room. It's like hang on a sec. Like it's like in a room of 30 people. Like, what are you going to do with those 90 definitions?
I agree, absolutely, and that's why I said, well, let's clarify what this stuff means.
No, look, there's no clarification. Each person would mean something different, right? That's why you have to clarify it with that person. So now, when I said to you at the start that you came in here and you wanted to hash out what these things mean, and Michael said as if there was a fact of the matter, and you said that's not what you were doing. Can you explain fundamentally what you're doing differently to what I suggested you were doing?
I mean, I don't know how to explain it any different way. The only thing I can say is that all I wanted to know was, I guess, you guys' definition or some sort of agreed upon definition of what the terms mean, so that when I listened to the debate, like what was happening previously, that I could understand everyone's point of view.
Right. If you
look,
want to know how I define, right? If that's all you want to know, right? If that's all you want to know, right? The way I define atheism, agnosticism, and theism, I just define atheism as positing not God, right? Or God doesn't exist. I posit the theist as saying that God does exist or something in that realm, right? And I just take the agnostic to be talking about something completely different, either talking about the knowledge of the God proposition. So either like some agnostics will say that knowing whether or not God exists or doesn't exist is unknowable, right? Or that they just don't have any knowledge on, what would constitute as evidence for God, right?
Okay, so and see, if everybody took those definitions and used those in the conversation, it would have probably been beneficial because everybody would have agreed upon definitions.
Now you're just being dishonest, buddy.
How so?
I heard we all heard what you said in the beginning of the conversation. I've been going in and out for like an hour, and I've been hearing you talk for the last, hour and 30 minutes, I guess. And in the beginning I was here for the beginning of the conversation, and you said nothing of the sort in the beginning. If you just said that in the beginning,
what is it that you think that I said?
You said, and what I heard you say was that you're going to take the atheist position, right? That's what I heard you say.
I probably shouldn't have said
the
that.
atheist position, as though there was a fact of the matter. Also, let's go back to you saying some other fucking horse shit, right? Like evidence wins out over arguments, specifically deductive arguments. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Any kind of arguments.
Where did you come from?
Any kind of arguments are outweighed by evidence.
Any kind of arguments. Okay.
I'm going to say arguments that go against the actual evidence. We should stipulate.
Yeah, okay. Let's say we got a bunch of evidence that you don't exist, right? Would you argue with that?
How would you demonstrate that evidence?
Look, I'm just saying, if we had that evidence, would you accept it?
I guess if you had actual demonstrable evidence, I wouldn't have a choice. But I mean,
someone's
demonstrate.
Yeah, I guess you just phase out of existence, huh?
Just a bit of paper to PubMed, boys.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. You just disappear like freaking Thanos.
Demonstrable evidence and evidence.
I'm sorry, what was that?
What's the difference between demonstrable evidence and evidence?
I'm in my opinion, it's the same thing. But by demonstrable, I mean something that you can demonstrate or show to someone else.
Yeah, typically we don't say demonstrable evidence. We just say evidence because evidence already entails that there's some empirical basis or metric, or that it can be demonstrated. Right?
I would have thought that too.
Look. There's a difference between empirical arguments and deductive arguments, and you've accepted one and shit all over the other one.
Talking Icon, do you have a YouTube channel? Are you part of the skeptic community, Talking Icon?
Who?
That's you, Clarity.
Clarity, are you there?
Yeah, I'm not. What?
Oh, I was
Do you have a
asking if you were
YouTube
there.
channel, buddy?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
So, are you looking for arguments against God or for God? Like, what are you asking?
No, I don't even hardly ever participate in this stuff. I just listen, and all I wanted to know was some clarification on the terms that people were using. That's literally it. But I am argumentative. I will get into it with people when they want to argue.
Not too great at it, are you?
Look, if I don't see why
opinion.
if you come into a room, right, with 40 people in it, and they each have their own maybe slightly different definition for what each of these things are, why would we all just like compromise slightly and agree on a bastardized version just so that you could go away and be happy that you had a box to shove everyone into rather than just argue what they believe?
I'm sorry. How do you have a conversation with 30 people in a room without agreeing on the terms that you're using?
You don't hold them by what they
we
mean.
say the words, dumbass.
Dude,
Clarity,
quit
aren't you a
calling me
Christian?
names. You're a fucking moron.
Clarity, aren't you a Christian?
No, I'm not.
I'm remembering correctly. I remember you though.
You've never talked to me before. I don't think I've ever even been on this server before.
No, but you've been on other servers.
And I don't ever talk. Literally, I never talk. This is the longest
Oh, we can't
conversation
tell
I've
by
ever
your
had.
performance here today, though.
I mean,
I don't ever talk is not a fucking attribution that we can make to you, bud. You've held this fucking room hostage for like 2 hours now.
I mean, clarity at this point, the question is sort of like, why do we integrate upon it definitions? If you know what I mean, and I know what you mean, what's the issue?
Well, when there's 40 people, I don't think, 2/3 of the people think one thing, 2/3 think another thing, and the other 2/3 think another thing. So.
Oh God, all these people with their own beliefs and shit. Fucking Christ!
You're trying to have a conversation. How do you have the conversation when people argue about something and they don't agree on what the terms
mean? We tell people what we mean, right?
That's what I wanted.
No, but you tell if you're talking to someone,
you told them that they were wrong in virtue of how they were using the words. You told the people that were you told people who were in conversation with you that they were wrong about their meaning of the words that they were using.
People were.
What the fuck? Are you kidding me? Fuck out of here!
Oh my God, this dude is so fucked.
Look, just for future reference, right? You're only gonna discuss the meanings of these words in reference to something else, right? You don't just start off being like, let's just establish every philosophical position we could possibly have before we get into a disagreement, right? You should either attack a position directly or hold a position, and then from there, when you start conversing, if you believe that there's a difference in the way you're defining things, then you can hash it out.
Yeah, this has essentially just been quibbling over semantics. This is pathetic.
So why are you guys all still listening?
Some people were wrong about their meaning.
So what position do you hold? I'm curious. You have to hold some position, Clarity. So what position do you hold on the philosophy of religion, or theism, or atheism, or whatever?
To simply put, I'm agnostic.
Oh, what's that mean?
No, wait. You guys missed the whole 2 hours that we spent
defining some of it.
Agnostic atheism. Oh, no, yeah. No, he's not agnostic, simply put. He's an
that's why I want to know.
Atheist.
I literally just said I'm agnostic. I didn't say I was an agnostic.
Denny's corrected him, Michael.
Can you tell me what?
Are you acknowledging the correction that you were given earlier? Is that what's going on?
Agnostic.
Clarity, did you hear me?
What was the question?
Are you acknowledging then the correction that you were issued earlier about definition of terms, or are you embracing that definition of terms, or what's
I'm
what
just
do you mean by
using agnostic because that seems to be what everyone agrees my position would actually be if I had to define it. And give me one.
Has he said what he means when he says he's an agnostic?
No, like he just wants to know what we all mean.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I think that he's just using that term for the purposes of this room.
I'm not going to do definitions again.
Yeah, I know.
You guys
I'm
can
not
do
really
it.
interested.
Yeah, you guys can do it, but I'm out.
What do you want to do, Michael?
I don't. But
I was just wondering what his position was on the definition, like whether or not he was using it for this room, or if that's his new identity or whatever.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk to him about the definition, I'm happy to. Bounce.
It's one of the most important.
To the Steve McRae show.
Yeah,
It's the most important issue of our time.
Arguably more important than climate change. Sorting this out.
I'm going to need to see the evidence for that, Tom. I don't want to hear the argument.
Say it all again. Is the writer? Writer.
Ice cream trucks are so creepy, man. Luring kids to a van full of like ice cream.
I love the ice cream truck.
I never did the ice cream truck.
I kind of get a little excited. Like I run out of my house,
I get the one that has the gumballs.
Yeah, me too. That's right. The gumball.
Either the eyes or the nose or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
It's
me too.
All garbage.
JJ,
yes, but
you're garbage.
But if you don't go out and buy it, as soon as you hear the fucking alarm, you might miss it, JJ. So there's no time to rationally contemplate it. You get out there and get that ice cream while you have the chance.
There's only one thing I've ever enjoyed from an ice cream truck, and it's like the bomb pop, and it's a popsicle, right? Big,
yeah.
But it's sour. It's like a lemonade popsicle.
Yeah, red, white, and blue, but it's sour. Yeah, yep. I know what the bomb pop is. But I'm kind of with Danny. I like the bomb pop if they didn't have the eyes or the faces that Danny's talking about with the gumballs. Then I would get the bomb pop. I grew up in the ghetto.
50% of children are obese. Yay, ice cream!
Yeah.
Or I guess I did used to like the sherbet. I guess they're the push-ups. Push-ups?
Yeah, the sherbet.
The orange. Orange
Yes.
sherbet stuff. Yeah, I like.
Fuck yeah.
I like citrus.
Fuck yeah. Isn't sherbet?
Wait, that's
also
not true. Sugar, it's about 20%, at most 20%.
50% of 45% of Americans are obese. 70% are fat. Children is 40%. Stats are whack.
Get wrecked, sugar.
Yeah, sugar.
Well, do you
Molly
accept
says
the
fuck off.
sugar? Do you accept the CDC? Sugar.
He doesn't know what that
Only when he's being tested for gonorrhea.
Okay, here we go. There's the article in general.
Get him, Danny.
CDC. Obesity prevalence was 14% from 2 to 5-year-olds, 18.4 among 6 to 11-year-olds, 20% from 12 to 19-year-olds. No 45 or 50%. You're just making stuff up. That's absolutely silly.
What if you add all those numbers together, Danny?
Yeah, the percentage.
You might be thinking overweight or obese, maybe.
Sugar, sit the fuck down, get wrecked, prolapsed, and destroyed.
Wipe the cum off your face.
What's the definition of obese, though?
Sugar, I'm gonna need you to dry off.
Above 95 percentile. Yikes, that's super high.
Danny's been hauling ass lately, man.
that going
Sugar-
off a BMI? Is that going off a BMI chart? Because you know that.
Yeah,
a
95%.
weightlifter, excuse me, a weightlifter can do a BMI chart and be in the range of obese and have like.
How many
up to
6-year-old
2% body
weightlifters do you
fat.
know?
I didn't know he said children. I'm sorry. I thought he said. Oh, he did. My apologies.
You know, I suppose we need to make a distinction between assholes and assholers.
Hey, Bet would be an asshole.
Well, several people qualify.
Yeah, JJ would be an asshole.
Well, I'm probably a little of both.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say no to
Some
that
children
one.
weightlifters. Do like a percentage of how many children weight.
Okay. For over 40% of 16 to 19 are obese, though.
Wait, that's not what. Wait, over 16?
Over 40%. I'll post. According to Duke, Wake Forest, one of the biggest studies.
You would accept that source over the CDC?
Yes, I absolutely believe that most teenagers over 40% are obese. 100%. Yeah.
I teach. Wait, you said over 16? Are you look, there's a difference between. There's also overweight and obese. Which one are you talking about?
Obese. So 16 between ages 16 and 19, over 40% are obese.
That
What are
can't
the
be
sources?
Right. That's just not
I
right.
just posted it in general. Read up.
What are the sources that NBC News is citing?
When it comes to
What are
United
the
States of
sources
America,
that NBC News is citing, Sugar?
a study done by Duke and Wake Forest in combination. And then when it comes to the United States of America as a whole, we all know that 45% are obese,
You're
and
just saying
70%
shit.
are
You're literally
obese
just
or
saying
overweight.
shit. Shut the
70%.
fuck up.
So yes, let's all cheer for ice cream as our country dies of obesity. Yay!
Hopefully you
Shut the
get
fuck
some
up,
and then
Sugar.
you die. Hopefully you eat
Let's
some
praise
ice
ice cream some more. Let's talk about the gumdrop ice cream and how amazing it is. Let's talk about.
Let's talk about your earthing mats and how great that is.
Sugar's right. Stop talking about ice cream because
Let's talk
children
about
are
your
fat.
ex almost giving you chlamydia, you piece of shit.
While we're at it, let's talk about how great heroin is. Man, have you guys ever hit heroin, like a good shot in the vein? Oh, it feels so
I
good.
would hit you with heroin.
It feels so great. Like, it's
But
amazing.
you got an overdose.
You probably know better than I do.
What does it mean boxed?
I don't understand why we let Sugar in the server. I
What do
don't
you
get
mean
it.
he knows better than you do? He's never done fucking heroin.
No? I'm not sure about that.
No, he's trying to moralize about using pharmaceutical opioids. He's a fucking
Sugar, tell us about your.
But he's
your
used them.
Tell us about Klonopin, Sugar.
No, he uses benzos.
We already know that he's used some.
The crazy thing is, I appreciate the benefits of meditation, right? But the people who prescribe it, they don't know a damn thing about modern medicine. Interested in that stuff to begin with. For some reason,